Ever get the feeling that companies are playing kind of like a shell game with their finances?
Ooh, yeah.
Well, one of their tricks is this thing called a fiscal year.
Uh-huh.
And trust me, it's not just boring accounting jargon.
Right.
We're going deep on this today
Yeah.
to uncover how it works, why it matters to you, and maybe even how some companies use it to their advantage.
Interesting.
So to get to the bottom of this, we've got like a stack of sources here.
Good.
Excerpts from the National Retail Foundation,
Uh-huh.
a deep dive on Investopedia, and even some insights from Wikipedia.
Wow.
But before we get lost in the weeds, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What is a fiscal year?
So simply put, a fiscal year is like a company's personal calendar for its finances.
Okay.
It's a 12-month period that they use for reporting taxes and budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
It doesn't have to follow the regular January to December calendar.
Hold on, so companies can just pick and choose their year end?
Yeah.
That seems like it could get kind of messy.
It can. And that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Imagine a retailer's calendar, like a puzzle,
Okay.
where they want those big holiday sales to always land in the same spot each year, even if it means adding an extra week some years.
Okay, that's starting to make sense.
Yeah.
But why all the fuss about a different year end?
Right.
Couldn't they just stick with the regular calendar?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Companies want to show their best side right.
Right.
Choosing a strategic fiscal year end
Uh-huh.
can make their financial reports look a lot rosier.
Okay.
Take Macy's, for example.
Okay, I'm listening.
What's Macy's doing?
Yeah, what are they doing?
They end their fiscal year on the Saturday, closest to January 31st,
Okay.
just after the holiday rush.
Oh, so right after all the holiday sales are done.
Exactly this way.
Huh.
Their annual report captured all those big holiday sales, making their performance look extra strong.
So they're basically timing their reports to highlight the good stuff.
Yeah.
Clever, but is that even allowed?
It is, and many companies do it.
Huh?
Take tech companies.
Okay.
Lots of them have strong sales in the first half of the year,
Mm-hmm.
so they often end their fiscal year in late June.
Oh.
This way, the reports show a surge in sales, even if things slow down later in the year.
That's pretty strategic, but this whole thing with the extra week?
Yeah,
It sounds like they're playing with time itself.
they kind of are.
Whoa.
It's called a 53-week year.
53 weeks.
Yeah, and it happens about every 5 to 6 years,
Oh, wow.
to account for the fact that a regular year isn't exactly 52 weeks long.
Right.
The National Retail Foundation, or NRF,
Uh-huh.
even has a special 454 calendar
Okay.
to smooth out the bumps and make sure year-over-year comparisons are accurate.
So it's like a financial time machine,
Yeah.
making sure everything lines up.
Yeah, you got it?
I'm starting to see how this could get pretty complex.
It does, especially when you consider that different countries have their own quirks when it comes to fiscal years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the U.S., you might be surprised to learn that the government's fiscal year starts on October 1st.
Really? That's so different from how most people think about the year.
It is.
Why would they do that?
It's a historical thing tied to budget cycles and when they need to have their finances in order.
Oh.
But it just goes to show that fiscal years aren't as cut and dry as they seem.
Right.
Even within the same country, you can have different fiscal years depending on whether you're talking about the government or a company.
Okay, now I'm really curious about how all this plays out in other countries.
Yeah.
Our sources mentioned some interesting examples, right?
They did, for instance, Australia and New Zealand follow a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year, almost opposite of the U.S. government.
So their New Year's in the middle of summer. That's wild. What about other countries?
The U.K. is even more interesting.
Okay.
Their government uses April 1st to March 31st for its fiscal year.
Wait, April 1st? That's April Fool's Day? Are they serious?
Completely serious. And it actually goes back to a calendar change they made centuries ago.
Yeah.
Talk about a long-lasting prank.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker.
Okay.
Their personal tax year starts on a totally different day, April 6th.
Okay, now I'm officially confused.
Yeah.
So even within the same country, there can be multiple New Year's happening at different times, all for financial purposes.
Exactly. And this is why understanding fiscal years is so important.
Right.
It's not just about memorizing dates. It's about understanding how these choices affect a company's financial picture and how you can use that information to make smarter decisions, whether you're an investor or just trying to make sense of the news.
This is already making me rethink how I look at company reports and news headlines.
Yeah.
I never realized how much strategy goes into something as Seemingly simple as choosing when to end the year.
It's a subtle but powerful tool, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, no.
Stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll uncover even more fascinating examples of how companies leverage fiscal years to tell their financial story.
Okay.
And maybe even bend the rules a little.
Ooh, I'm hooked. Let's dive deeper.
Let's go. You know, it's amazing how something as seemingly simple as choosing a fiscal year can have such a big impact on a company's financial narrative.
It's like they're painting a picture, and the fiscal year is the frame they choose to highlight certain details.
Exactly. And some companies have gotten really creative with their fiscal year choices, almost like they're playing a game with investors.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Tell me more about how companies use this to their advantage.
Well, let's go back in time for a moment. The concept of a fiscal year wasn't always so widespread.
Oh, really?
No, in the early days of accounting, businesses might have used different time frames, making it incredibly difficult to compare performance or analyze trends.
So it was chaos, like trying to compare apples and oranges.
Precisely. As the business world became more complex, the need for a standardized reporting period grew. Enter the fiscal year, whether aligned with the calendar year or strategically chosen, it brought order to the financial chaos.
It's like establishing a common language for business finances, but I'm wondering, are there any industries where specific fiscal year choices are particularly common?
Absolutely. Take the retail industry, for example.
Yeah.
The NRF, which we talked about earlier, developed a 4-5-4 calendar specifically for retail sales reporting.
Right.
Imagine a retailer's calendar like a puzzle, where holidays always land in the same spot each year.
So Black Friday always falls in the same puzzle piece, so to speak, making it easier to compare sales year over year.
That's the idea. The 4-5-4 calendar ensures consistent comparisons, even with those 53-week years we discussed. It also helps retailers track seasonal trends and make sure they're comparing apples to apples.
This is making me realize just how much thought goes into something I never even considered before.
It's often the things we take for granted that have the most interesting stories behind them. Now remember those global variations we mentioned. The UK's government fiscal year, starting on April Fool's Day, is a fascinating example of how history can influence something as technical as financial reporting.
Right. It's like a financial echo from centuries ago. But what about companies that operate in multiple countries with different fiscal years?
Yeah,
How do they manage their reporting?
that's a great question. Multinational corporations often need to make adjustments to align those different fiscal years for consolidated reporting. It's like piecing together a giant financial puzzle, making sure all the pieces fit, even if they're from different boxes.
So there's even more strategy involved when you're dealing with a global company.
Absolutely.
Right.
But even for individuals like you and me, understanding fiscal years can be incredibly beneficial.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. How can this help me with my personal finances?
Well, knowing a company's fiscal year end can help you interpret their financial reports more effectively. Let's say you're considering investing in a retail company and, their fiscal year ends in January.
So I'd be able to see how they perform during the holiday season, which is crucial for retailers.
Exactly. You'd have a much clearer picture of their overall performance and could make a more informed decision.
It's like having a cheat sheet for understanding company financials.
Yeah, it is.
Now I have to ask about the 52-53 week thing again.
Okay.
How do companies actually handle that extra week in their reports?
Remember that special 4-5-4 calendar the NRF uses?
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to smooth things out.
Yeah.
They essentially restate the 53-week year to make it comparable to previous 52-week years.
So it's like they're adjusting the time machine to ensure a consistent picture?
Precisely. And this is where transparency becomes crucial.
Okay.
Companies need to be upfront about how they're handling this extra week and any other adjustments they make. Otherwise, it could look like they're trying to manipulate their numbers.
That makes sense. No one likes a sneaky time traveler.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears and look at a specific example that highlights the strategic use of fiscal years.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how Apple seems to always release its new iPhones in September?
Now that you mention it, yes. It's like clockwork.
Well, it's no coincidence. Apple ends its fiscal year on the last Saturday of September, which allows them to capture those new iPhone sales in their annual report.
So they're strategically aligning their product launches with their fiscal year end to boost their numbers.
Precisely. It's a clever way to showcase their strongest sales period and present a positive picture to investors.
This is starting to feel like a game of financial chess. What about other tech companies? Do they have similar strategies?
Many do Microsoft, for example, opts for a fiscal year that ends on the last day of June.
Why June? That seems a bit random.
Not at all. It aligns with their business model, which is heavily focused on software and cloud services.
Oh, okay.
They tend to see strong sales in the first half of the year, leading up to their major software releases and renewals.
So they're capitalizing on that early momentum and ending their year on a high note.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the nuances of their business cycles and choosing a fiscal year-end that reflects their strengths.
This is making me realize just how much strategic thinking goes into something I always considered a simple accounting detail.
And it highlights the importance of understanding fiscal years, not just for companies, but for anyone trying to make sense of the financial world.
I'm starting to see company reports and news headlines in a whole new light.
Good.
But before we wrap up this part, I'm curious about the tax implications of all this.
Okay.
We've talked about companies choosing their fiscal year, but are there any rules they need to follow?
That's an important point. In the U.S., the IRS has specific guidelines regarding fiscal years for tax purposes. While businesses have flexibility, they need to maintain consistent records and follow those guidelines when filing their taxes.
So freedom to choose, but with responsibility to comply.
Exactly. And these regulations often specify deadlines for filing tax returns based on the chosen fiscal year end.
It's another layer of complexity that underscores the importance of understanding fiscal years.
It's amazing how something that seems so straightforward on the surface can have so many layers and nuances.
That's the beauty of a deep dive. We get to peel back those layers and discover the fascinating intricacies that shape our world.
Well said.
And in the final part of our exploration, we'll leave you with a thought-provoking question to ponder and some additional resources to continue your own fiscal year journey.
I'm ready to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Well, we've certainly journeyed through the ins and outs of fiscal years today, haven't we?
We have.
From basic definitions to uncovering strategic maneuvers,
Yeah.
and even traveled the globe to see how different countries approach this financial quirk.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It's amazing how much depth there is to something that seemed so simple at first.
I know, right?
So to help you connect the dots,
Okay.
and maybe even spark some new ideas,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
The cliffhanger.
Something to keep those mental gears turning even after the episode ends. Ready for it.
I'm ready.
Now that you know about fiscal years and how strategic they can be, look up the fiscal year end of some of your favorite companies.
Oh, that's a good one.
I bet you'll find some interesting patterns.
Yeah.
And maybe even start to see those quarterly reports in a whole new light.
For sure.
It's like having insider knowledge.
Right.
You'll be able to anticipate those big sales periods and understand why a company's financial performance might fluctuate throughout the year.
Exactly.
And if we can offer one final piece of advice,
Okay.
it would be this.
What's that?
Understanding a company's fiscal year can give you a real edge in investment decisions.
Absolutely. It's like having a secret weapon.
That's a game changer. By knowing when to expect those peak sales periods, you can get a clearer picture of a company's true potential and make smarter investment choices.
Makes sense.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Thanks to our insightful sources from the NRF Investopedia and even Wikipedia.
Those are some great resources.
We've explored the history, the strategies, the global variations, and even the tax implications of this often overlooked aspect of finance.
Yeah, who knew fiscal years could be so interesting?
It's been a true deep dive uncovering the hidden workings of fiscal years.
Yes.
And showing just how much impact they have on the financial world.
Absolutely.
But our exploration doesn't end here.
Okay.
Remember that thought-provoking question we left you with?
I do.
Take it as a starting point for your own financial investigations.
Good advice.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, when we'll uncover another fascinating layer of our complex and ever-changing world.
Looking forward to it.
Happy exploring.